IHMS.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your host, Ameer, reporting for the International Harari Media Services Youth Program. And during this segment, we are joined by two Harari youth from Texas, Nagih and Zignat. So welcome to the program. It's great that you've joined IHMS, especially during a peak time of year where the workload becomes substantial and everything is just stressful. And so we thank you for your time. During a time of isolation, it's been rather hard to unite with many of our loved ones and our cultural community. And as you're well aware, the Harari community hosts a variety of events to bring each other together from around the world. One of which rather being Kuba, which was supposed to be held in Toronto this summer, but due to obvious reasons, it has been postponed. But despite this, technological advancements such as Zoom is what has brought us here together, and our programming through this medium is what we'll hope will allow us to continue cohesion between our youth and maybe preserve our culture. Now, the segment won't be too long, and what we want to do first is humanize the faces behind these names here. So let's start with you, Zignat. Tell me a bit about who you are, what level of study that you're in, and maybe your main interests or hobbies during this pandemic, aside from school.
Oh, man. Okay. So, assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Zignat Abdisbhan. Right now, I work as a product manager at a tech company called Twitch out in California. Although I was born and raised in Texas, in the Dallas, Texas Harari community out here. My level of school, I studied computer engineering, after which then I got my master's in business administration. And hobbies in the pandemic. I feel like I've been reading a lot of books. I wish I could say I've been exercising. No, that hasn't been happening. But yeah, probably just reading a bunch more. I'm really boring.
That's excellent. Yeah. And Nagih, tell me a bit about, who you are, since this is the first time meeting you as well. What level of fields, what studies that you're in, maybe your main interests or hobbies during this pandemic?
Yeah, so I'm Nagih. So I got my bachelor's in business, and I concentrated in marketing. Born and raised in Dallas, went to school in Dallas. I know Zignat, she went to Chicago for her MBA. But I stayed local. I grew up in the community my whole life. Some of my hobbies, obviously, is like playing basketball. I love reading, but I don't like reading books, but I like reading articles. I like trying to get educated. I like getting educated and, understanding what's going on in politics, the environment, economics, things like that. And the pandemic really got me into like financial, finance management. So learning how to invest and saving money and being able to budget better. Just because a lot of people, it's tough times nowadays.
Yeah, definitely.
But obviously, it opened that opportunity to learn so much more about things I probably overlooked, prior to the pandemic. So not saying that the pandemic is good, but there are blessings in disguise. So
that's definitely true.
100%.
Yeah, a lot of people are like doing like freelance work, just
Yeah.
to get by, especially as students, right? And I think it's good to keep your mind fresh with like new school, new skills to acquire that can help, help you pay off your debt for university, things of that sort. And given the shifting dynamic of academia and school, like how have things changed for you, and what are things that you used to be able to do that you now can't in school? And also, were you involved in like extracurricular activities? And those are definitely an enhancement to studies. So what were you involved in university, or what are things that you used to be able to do that you weren't able to?
Oh,
You,
Yasin Zignat.
you go first. You go first.
Okay. No, no, I'm not gonna go. You got it. You got it.
I mean, I feel like school is a long time ago for me now.
All right.
Um, uh, I think I'll answer the question from more of like a work perspective, since yeah, it's not school's a long time for me, and now I don't remember anything that happened back then. Um, from a work perspective, it's hard to it's hard to create relationships with the people in those places as easily, right? Because you're seeing them through the screen all of the time. You're chatting a lot through whatever like messenger that your company is using, and a lot of nuance is lost when you're not being able to talk to people in real life. And staying connected and staying like on the same page and aligned is like really really hard. And you don't have those like random encounters you'd have with people, right? Like every conversation I have is planned. Like I can't just like walk up to somebody randomly, or see them in the hallway, or uh, it's just like everything has to be so much more intentional. And I'm the kind of person who really enjoys like the social act like part of work. Like I love seeing people and like asking them how they are and how they've been and what they're working on, what's interesting, what's going on in their lives. And I've had to be way more intentional about connecting with people that I don't work with on a daily basis, like setting up time, be like, hey, let's have like a 30-minute Zoom lunch or whatever, and catch up. So for me, that's the best way to stay connected and I don't know, just be more of like a community member within my company instead of just somebody who does her work and logs off at 5 p.m., you know?
Absolutely. And what about you, Nagih? Do you differ on that?
No, I actually echo what Zignat's saying. I'm just like her in a way where I do thrive in in like social gatherings. I personally did not like the whole idea of working from home, of course, was it sounded good in the beginning. And it was good because I mean saving money. Obviously you don't have to go through the daily commute, spending 2 hours of your entire day going going to and from work. But I don't know, there's a bit of nostalgia that I have, just kind of driving, because that was our lives for like that was your life for 3-4 years of however you've been working, right? And for it to come to a halt because of something that's debilitating, to the entire world, right? You have the pandemic going on and stuff. Knowing that you have that kind of barrier, it kind of eats you up a little bit. I used to be involved in like with my coworkers and just do things with them back in college. I wasn't involved in a lot of organizations in college, but I didn't need to because I was already pretty social, and I would just be included in a lot of things that were going on anyways. But you do miss that element of being connected with people, especially when you're forced to not connect anymore. Like it's not like you're willing to say, hey, listen, I want to turn off. Somebody's turning off the button for you now, and losing that sense of control and losing that ability. It does sting a little bit, and I could see why a lot of people are itching to kind of have the world come back again. You know what I mean? And travel and do things that, that'll get people together, you know?
Yeah, and you're very right about nostalgia. It is a big component of the pandemic because we miss our former lives without it being virtual. And
Right.
speaking of nostalgia, right? Do you have any memories or recollections of heritage festivities you've taken part of? Because we can look towards cultural involvement, right, which entails advocating for our own culture, learning about our own heritage. So I'm sure there are many events that you may have been to, with Harariach, right? You know, whether it be balachus, whether it be
Mhm.
just social functions as well. Do you have any memories of that? I'll start with whoever
Absolutely.
wants to go first. Yeah.
I guess I'll start just so that so I'll start. I mean, obviously, the most memorable one is going to be like a July 4th. I mean, Dallas was the latest city to host the international event. Um, a lot of people love saying things about Dallas, you know what I mean? But hey, that's my city. So, but regardless, it doesn't matter. I mean, a lot of people look at, just being together with, with other Hararis and being able to have the same goal. It's like it's just cool. It's cool to have someone that that you never met in your life speak the same language as people that you've grown up with, like your parents and your friends and all that. You know what I mean? It just feels different. You know what I mean? And having that sense of unity, um, being able to partake in like balachus and even amutagars and stuff like that. It has that sentimental value because you know that people around you that know your culture and that share the same feelings as you. It really is amazing. Like it's a good way of therapy, and also it's a good way to kind of reconnect with with your culture outside of just being in your house and seeing the gay guy every day. It's better to also understand what community really means, by seeing everybody else. It's just like you.
Great.
Yeah, I would I would say the same thing. I think that piece not just talking about of community is like the big one because I feel like I always like wrestle because at least the American society is a very individualistic one. And like growing up in it, you battle both like I want to do what I want versus like being there for your community because we were raised in a be there for your community type uh culture. And even like me living in California, it's like hard because I want to achieve, like do well in my career, um, and rise up. But at the same time, like I'm missing out on a lot, like those Eid celebrations or regular come-togethers, Amuta, Haraskar. There's so many things that like we do for each other because we're around each other. We can show up, um, and it's hard not being able to do that. Like we recently had like an Amuta in Dallas, and like not being able to be there for each other was really hard. Like not being able to show up.
Yeah.
Um, and same thing. Like the same day we had like the Amuta, it was actually like one of the women from our like that I grew up with. She was having her nikah and not being able to be there for her either. You know, it's very hard, especially as we grow older. Like we want to keep these traditions close to us so we can pass them on as much as we can, and not being able to partake like hinders us. It's sad.
Definitely. And with cultural preservation, I want to ask, what does cultural preservation as a Harari mean to you?
Oh man, it's like I don't know. You could say it's just going through the motions of like some of those around like certain events, like knowing what to do when someone has a baby, or knowing what to do when someone passes away, or knowing what foods to eat during Ramadan, or like whatever, right? Um, I think those are all part of it, like knowing those things, and then being able to act on those things within our community. But sometimes I also think like I would want to know more about like like why we did those things. This is like, I feel like might be going on a tangent, but sometimes like all cultures derived from like the place that culture was built, right? And like why people do the things they do is very much a part of like their history and that shared community and growing up to each other, right? Um, like in Harar and Gay, they had like different afochas, right? That would take care of each other. And you would join an afocha that's like in your neighborhood, and like they would take care of each other for burials and like coming together when someone has a baby, or like having those little tiny communities. Like how did they build them in that way or that fashion, right? Like those are the kinds of things I sometimes want to know, or like why it is that we eat like the exact foods we eat, like so it's not only is it like the actions we take, but like I think knowing the history behind why the actions we take is like super important, I think, as well.
I agree. And there's the discourse of how do we continue our culture without parenting the same way our parents have raised us, because times progressively change, right? So there's certain components of that culture that we want to retain, but at the same time, we want to conform with the current times. So, that way, whenever we're, for example, raising our offspring, are, they sort of, they are raised in a way that kind of aligns with the current era that they're in, rather than maybe ways that our parents may have taught us. So I think there's a critical balance between those two. Yeah. Nagih, do you want to go ahead?
I mean, Ziad basically just kind of, literally just said everything that I was gonna say. Um, preservation is just kind of like a by any means necessary type mentality of being able to do what you got to do to make sure you don't die, right? Make sure your culture doesn't die. So by educating, by using policy, um, you know, by
Language.
exercising anything anything that would obviously non-violence. I'm not advocating for violence. I'm on a recorded line, right? you know, so obviously any type of method that would progress you, that is obviously within the confines of the law and everything like that. And of course, I mean, even just amongst one another, instead of looking at it from a macro standpoint, look at it from a micro standpoint. It all starts in the house, making sure that kids, they understand not only what the language is, but the significance of the language, where it derived from. Like why did we do this? What is a ankar mahtab? You know what I mean? What does that mean, right? Like all of that stuff. Why do we have
Why is
the
it called
ingredients?
that? Right? Why is
Yeah,
it called
exactly.
Ankar? There's
Why is
like
it ankar
literal
mahtab?
tradition and history behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's crazy. There's history behind all of that, and it's
There
like,
is. Yeah.
and those subtleties and all those and all of that, when you have a group of people believe in it, there you go. You just created a part of a culture, right? You created something that people can hold on to. Why do we add the ingredients inside of our meals, right? What's the significance of these ingredients, like butter and like and fenugreek, right? For hulbat maraq, like what is that, right? You know what I mean? Like all of that stuff is a part of the culture, and some people would argue and say, hey, listen, a lot of people may or may not know what they all mean. They just follow, but you got to know where you come from. You got to understand those things, and then that's when you can teach people the significance of those things. And that's how you could truly preserve something. That's why they have museums. You know what I mean? That's why they have that. That's why a class called history exists, right? Because it's not just what happened, but why it happened, who, where, all that stuff.
I agree. And I feel like the pandemic has made it harder for kids to go back home, right? Bad Zahar Nasa, Harar be Masinan Mifarkana. So I think it's always good, to go back home if if you have grandparents, for instance, maybe talk to them, right? They're the main roots who taught your parents, who will in turn, teach you, right? The language, history, your ancestral history, things of that nature, right? So I feel, the pandemic has made it harder to, preserve culture, but at the same time, we are delegated as the next generation to continue that, right? And among our youth, how do you feel social cohesion has been strained because of this? Like, especially before COVID-19, a lot of Harari diaspora are dispersed throughout North America heavily, and it just seems there's a disconnect. We should definitely have more programs or events to unite us. So, what do you feel is the most important in such a regard to make sure that this cohesion is maintained?
That is a really good question. There is an answer, but we have to identify the problem first, right? The problem is, we live in the West, we live in a very multicultural society where the emphasis of maintaining and building our Harari culture arguably, isn't needed, right? We need to do it, of course, because it's good to preserve, and all that, but, people can live a normal, healthy life without it too. They can just live amongst other Americans or Canadians or Australians or anybody else in the West. You know what I mean? But I think having everyone understand the common goal of, preservation, like what you earlier asked, right? I think if we all have the same common goal of, preserving and understanding the magnitude of keeping a culture that's virtually going to go extinct in the next couple of generations, especially because of the migration from Harar and Redua all the way, outside to the West, right? The more and more this happens, the more and more emphasis we have to put in connecting and being together and saving, what is important, right? The legacy in a way. So I feel like as time goes on, that I guess that whole premise is going to really hit home. But that's something that we got to do, though. We have to actively have people understand, hey, listen, we got to, we're Hararis, we got a network, we're professionals. We can do this, we can do that, and we're relatable towards one another as well. You know what I mean? Because we have the same upbringing. So doing that and just kind of sharing that same goal and understanding the vision is going to definitely get us together. So I think that's something that we also have to do in Dallas as well, for sure. You know what I mean? There's definitely shortcomings. So those are things that we got to identify, and we got to be able to figure out creative ways to solve them,
I agree with that. And would you feel otherwise?
I think Nagih's right when it comes to figuring out like what the problem is, because it's easy. Like, you have to give somebody like a value proposition for why they're going to do something, right? Like, you can't just like invite a whole bunch of people to a Zoom and be like, please interact and be a community together, right? You have to give people a reason to show up. And figuring out.
So sort of like an incentive sort of thing to kind of maybe draw them or maybe entice them to I guess join, I guess, or
to come together in different kinds of ways, right? Like, I think what some of y'all started in Toronto was actually pretty cool with the Harari Professional Network, right? I've never gotten to go to any of the conferences. I think I heard about it like after it stopped happening. But I always thought like that's a great idea. We've got a lot of really amazing people that can share their knowledge and wisdom and mentorship and like a lot of other things, right, to people who are coming up behind them, right? Or like just like, or be able to meet each other and maybe come up with like really cool ideas to build things together, right? But you can't have that unless you're like talking to one another or like you've been able to like make those connections, right? Like Kubba and July 4th has been like an opportunity for that kind of stuff too. I think it's hard in the pandemic. it may be like if we were going to be in a world where the pandemic was going to last like another 2-3 years, I might say like, yeah, we have to solve for it. But I think it's an issue that we should solve for outside of the pandemic, specifically because it's just this time, like as Nagih said, is like, and I think you said too, Ameer, like it's hard for everyone just to like get through the basics, you know, like make sure you're still doing well at school or at work, being there for your family, providing if you need to be, or just taking care of like the essentials. And so whether we do it in the pandemic or not, I'm not as like bought in, but I think still like coming together, I think we still have opportunity to do that.
Yeah, we absolutely do. The pandemic has created unprecedented, new methods for us to interact with each other, right? Even though we can't do sports, right? Like we can't have Kuba this year, that's for certain. But we can have other interactive events online, and I think the best part of it being virtual is that it creates this inclusion because you never have to physically travel anywhere, right? To go to an event. Like all you need is just a laptop, and you can see everyone right here in front of your computer. So I think it's a massive plus, and as a result, I think that there will be a higher attendance of people as a result, because people won't be constrained anymore, citing financial concerns of traveling, or perhaps whether they don't have the time to attend. So I think that the pandemic is a plus in that regard, even though we can't physically be in that space to to meet each other and such. Yeah. So with that, I want to ask, is there an instance where you had to explain our culture to peers and they were like unfamiliar with it?
Absolutely. Even to some Habashas, right? Now it doesn't happen a lot, but even to some Habashas, they wouldn't know what, Harar, what do you say? What? You know what I mean? Like they have no idea. But the majority of the time, it's typically like Americans, like they have no idea. A lot of them don't even know where Ethiopia is. No clue. So yeah, for sure, definitely have to explain and talk to them a little bit about it, and then maybe even have them go and research a little bit more. Wikipedia can be somebody's best friend. Google as well. So absolutely, countless times.
I feel like sometimes I feel like I may be explaining more of like the like Islamic traditions more than I'm explaining like the Harari traditions, because sometimes they overlap. But I think kind of to the point I was making before, like America, growing up in America, you're taught by your environment, school, and your friends and all this stuff, like follow your dreams and like do what you want to do and be an individual, right? Whereas like our community is so focused, the culture we grew up in is so community focused. And I think explaining like those aspects of like why I'm going to do a certain thing, right? Like when my ummah passed away, like 8 years ago, I came back home. Like back then I thought I was going to like move to California. I was living in Texas and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go be an engineer in like Google and like advance over there. But instead I like moved home and like was there for my mom, and my friends were just like, what are you doing? You had plans to go be there for and advance your career. And I was just like, nah, in this case, like my family comes first, right? Like my community comes first. And like same thing for like supporting our community center during the pandemic, right? Like putting financial means towards that. That's supporting our community. Just like the pieces of like what make our culture community focused. I think those are the things that I find more often trying to explain to people, because they're just like, it's so weird to me because I'm just I moved out of the house when I was 18. I'm never going back.
Yeah, definitely. That there are many different ways that I guess families facilitate life in the house, and with that, I guess final question. We'd like to conclude this segment of IHMS's youth program. We have a lot of work to do in preserving our culture and unprecedented challenges that we continue to face. However, we must persevere in doing what we can to continue our cultural presence around the world. So, I'd like to thank the both of you for your time in this segment, and we'd love to have you again on this on our program.
Yes, I appreciate that as well, and hopefully I'm not going to be in a car. Okay, Markina. Listen, hey, it's unfortunate circumstances right now. So whoever is going to watch this, forgive me. I promise the next time I'll be in a better setting, better camera. I'll look a little better. Hopefully, my hair is going to be a little nicer. Let's go for it a little bit, but, today wasn't my day. But hey, it's a conversation regardless. It's just a conversation. So
that's right.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and thank you for the work that you guys do. This was really good.
IHMS.